Hey, what's up guys, it's Apollo Uchiha here, back with another part of What If Naruto Was in a Political Marriage. And before continuing this part, I would be also uploading a horror one-shot of Naruto after uploading this video. That was what I'm going to do today, and hopefully I do so. And if you haven't, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you like the content of this channel. And without further ado, let's continue our story. Chapter 25. There's a certain order of operations that shinobi must undertake when under an ambush. Step 1 is to immediately protect the target that the offenders might be trying to kill, destroy or kidnap. If there is nothing that is being protected, then the first step is to regroup forces and get a better vantage point of the situation. As soon as the explosion was heard, the 5 pair of dancers immediately jumped away from their table in order to get away from the attackers and assess the situation. Both Mei and Yujito were using their bodies to cover Naruto in case the assailants were going after him. There was more reflex than anything, seeing as this Naruto that they were protecting were clones. With step 1 all finished and dandy, they moved on to step 2, which was to keep calm and assess the situation. What the hell is going on? Naruto screamed over the sound of explosions. There were chunks of granite being flown into the air from great blasts of heat and flames. The civilians that were capable of walking all ran and shoved their way to the hall doors. A slightly quivering fern that was keeping guard led them on their way. Luckily enough for the guests, the hall doors were gaping huge, so they were able to file out with minimum hassle. Naruto spawned a clone. Get the Noibari! Even if they were shinobi, it wasn't exactly polite etiquette to bring large swords to a formal event, so they left it at the front doors. And my fan! Temari shouted after it. As it was, her combat potential was reduced greatly without her fan. And my sword! Kuretsuchi shouted after it as well. As the group watched the clones run in the direction of the front doors, they got into a circle position. Yujito extended her nails. Mei and Kuretsuchi brought their hands out, ready to make signs to create lava jutsu. Wu spawned water swords in both hands, and Temari drew 2-hand fans from the bodies of her clothing. Then they waited. As a rule, it wasn't the best of ideas to wait in positions while the enemy was attacking, but this situation wasn't exactly the norm. Explosions rocked the middle of the dance floor while a small man in a green tux ran and jumped through them, looking none worse for wear. Other than that, there was no visible attempts made by anyone to attack them. What's happening? Naruto asked once more. Fu narrowed her eyes. It's the Akatsuki. How do you know? Those explosions go off from a small clay-like figure, Fu pointed out. The guy who uses those is the guy that blew my face off, said with an angry tone and expression on her face, Fu. So what do we do now? Temari asked. Mei narrowed her eyes at the man jumping in between the explosions. That's Yagura. They're trying to kill him. Naruto seemed shocked by this. What? He's here? Mei nodded. This is a neutral zone, so we can fight each other without suffering the wrath of their other nations. I decided it was probably a better idea to not interact with him during the dance, and I also didn't mention it to make a situation. Kuretsuchi was connecting dots. You hired the Akatsuki to kill him? Nope. This is a surprise to me. Well, shit. Indeed. That's all fine and good, but what do we do now? You leave, a voice said with a body materializing soon after it. He had long black hair that was slicked down and had tear through on either side of his face. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Itachi, he said, glowering at the Uchiha with all the intensity that he could muster. We're not here for you, we're here for him, so take your Kage and leave. Then forget this ever happened. Why should we trust you? Your organization has tried to kill us before, Yujito asked. That was merely a conflict of interest, Itachi lied. The point is, we're here for the Sanbi, not you. Naruto eyes widened. We have to stop them. Naruto said to the rest of the group without drawing his eyes away from Itachi. What? You heard him, we can leave, Kurtasuchi said. But we can't let the Akatsuki have the Sanbi, Yujito said. They're gathering all bijus together for unknown reason. That's why A wouldn't let me go without him. Letting a terrorist mercenary group get their hands on the biju isn't exactly a good idea. Attacking them to save a dictatorial Kage isn't a good idea either. They only employ S-ranked ninja and we hardly know anything about them. Regardless, we have to try. I really wouldn't suggest you do that, Itachi said. The only reason you aren't dead right now is because your death might upset the global positions of power. But makes no mistake, if you attack us, we will respond in full. It seemed as if the world halted for a fraction of a second, while both sides seized the other one up. Yujito, Naruto said gravely. Yes? Don't look into his eyes. He can put you into genjutsu with them. Yujito smirked. A dark black and blue flame erupted all around her as she went into her partially transformed state. The calico eyes that appeared on her face was soon vanished, symbolizing that they'd been closed. Itachi sighed in annoyance. You'll regret this, he said in a tired voice. Yujito pounced at him as soon as he finished talking. Itachi dispersed into a flock of crows and came back together several paces away from and safe from Yujito. Come on, said Naruto. We have to go save him. A statue made out of what appeared to be marble came to a stop and blocked their path. It was soon joined by a disgruntled flute played with silver hair done up in a very unfitting style. A large blue man wearing little other than swimming trunks, who had a large sword strapped to his back, and a very imposing waiter who had ripped the sleeves off of his suit, revealing very tan, crowded muscles underneath. They stopped to size each other up. Has diplomacy failed so quickly? The waiter asked. Naruto nodded wordlessly. In the background, Yagura was quickly losing ground as the mad bomber continued to pepper him with explosions. The two groups continued to stare each other with thoughtful expression on their faces. Confrontations like these didn't happen very often in the shinobi world. It usually consisted of one side hunting the other side, stabbing the other side in the neck, or just digging the other side over. If they were lesser fighters, it was probably that they would rush at each other and try to inflict as much damage onto the other side as possible. But they aren't lesser fighters, they are shinobis. If they try to do that, then there be heavy consequences on both sides only because their fighting styles consisted of overwhelming enemies with sheer power and area of attack moves. If the statue version of Sasori summoned 20 puppets and sent them to attack the group while Kakazu's heart creatures were engaging them, there would be friendly fire that could be debilitating to the Akatsuki side. Okay, Naruto decided. Here's how we're going to do this. Temari, you go fight Stitches. Fu, you take the guy who can play the flute. I'll get Sharky. Kurtsuchi, you get Mr. Marble. And Mei, you go back up Yagura. They all ran lateral to fight that was happening in the middle of the floor except for Mei, who went directly to the ruckus. This was done so they could avoid fighting each other in a singular playing field. The danger of friendly fire was true for both sides. The fact that they all agreed to fight each other solo has less to do with anything like the rules of the battle. No, they were fighting each other to the death, and they freaking ninjas. There are no rules, but there are facts that they acknowledge as true on both sides. If we all fight in one big jungle, I could hurt my comrades, which will in turn. It was just the obvious pragmatic solution that both sides agreed upon. Link break with Fu and Hidan. This guy is crazy. Hidan had at some point pulled double spikes out of his tuxedo and ran at Fu with a reckless zeal. All of his strikes were either blocked or parried, and Fu found herself suddenly on the defensive. Hidan swung both his spikes upwards and suddenly plunged them downwards with practiced ease. Fu raised both her swords to block the swing, but as the two pairs of cutting implements hit each other, Fu nearly felt herself forced to her knees from the strength of the strike. While she was struggling under the weights of the strike, Hidan brought up a leg and kicked her directly in the solar plex. She spat out a wad of bile as she was flung across the floor. He was on top of her as soon as she stopped rolling and just barely missed impaling her torso to the floor with his spike as she rolled out of the way in the nick of time. Jumping back up on her feet, she was left with little time to think as he pulled the spike out of the ground and rushed her once more. This time, he went for a stab to the gut, which she effortlessly parried and retaliated by twirling around him and rendering his back muscles with both of her water sabers. Blood spurted out in gushes and waves, but he merely smirked and sent a kick to her side. So it was true then. Fu winced from the impact. This guy doesn't feel pain, nor does he seem afflicted by wounds at all. During their 2 months hiatus while they waited for Naruto to awaken, the members who had been on Sasuke's retrieval squad had exchanged notes on the people they fought. Kotsuchi fought this weird religious fanatic who had silver hair and a huge tri-blade scythe. She had mentioned that he was completely okay and battle ready even when his heart had been impaled, and that he did this weird metaphors when he got a drop of her blood, a chilling opponent indeed. Not only that, but he was also extremely good with genjutsu, really strong and very acrobatic. He fought like a man who had nothing to lose from dying because there was no way that he could die. This is going to be tough, but all I need to do is hack him apart. As they say, easier said than done. Die, you fucker! Hidan screamed at the top of his lungs while lunging, stabbing, and trying his damnedest to either kill her outright or get a bit of her blood so he could complete the ritual. Fu knew that she had to stay on the defensive if she wanted to make sure that the guy didn't get any of her blood, but was also aware that she couldn't inflict any lasting damage on him while doing so. Realizing how fruitless this was, he tried a different tactic, which involved throwing one of his spikes at Fu like one would throw a kunai. Fu was taught to never let go of her sword while sparring, no matter how good the opponent seemed or opportunity seemed. Throwing away your main weapon wasn't very smart after all, especially if your opponent has one as well. So she was not prepared for it in the slightest as it flew by and nicked her in the thigh. Ha ha ha! Blood for Jashin-sama! Hidan had gotten her blood, but now he had to get the blood that was either trickling down her thigh in small amount or on the spike that was impaling the ground around 20 feet behind her. As quick as she could, she wiped up the blood on her thigh and ripped a piece of her party dress off to stem the already small amount of blood that was welling up. Hidan looked longingly at the spike, which made Fu smirk. He had just lost one of his weapons and was now fighting to get something instead of focusing all his attention on her. For now she had the advantage. Link break with Temari and Kakazu. Things were going about as well as she had suspected. Given that was not well at all, it appeared that they were at a stalemate for the moment. Every time that Kakazu tried to hold her down with his tendrils, she used her hand fans to slice them to ribbons. Whenever he tried to engage her with taijutsu, she didn't even try to participate and just ran away from him. But he didn't dare try to get away from her because whenever he tried to do that, she caught him unaware and managed to slice him up with her hand fans. Even when he used the earth grudge fear technique to harden his skin to iron hot levels. Tamari is a fantastic wind user, capable of even creating blades of wind that slice through iron hard skin. She's agile, able to get away from his sweeping thrust and kicks, but the thing that made her such a fearsome opponent to Kakazu is that she's smart. Smart enough to know how strong she is, of which is scores below Kakazu knowing this. She decided to play the stalling game, only confronting him when he tried to leave and only trying to ward him off when he tried to attack her. She wasn't trying to kill him, so she go help her allies. She was just trying not to die, so her allies could hopefully finish their fights and come help her. This was perceived as frustrating for Kakazu. For his part, he was only trying to incapacitate her. Killing a member of the treaty that held all the ninja villages together had the potential to bring the wrath of all the villages back to the Akatsuki. She knew that she couldn't kill him, and he also knew that he couldn't kill her as well. Die, you fucker! Kakazu spared a glance at Hiden, who was trying to excruciatingly hard to murder the girl from the Taki. Kakazu had tried to pass a message to him while he was playing in the orchestra to make sure that he knew what he should do should worst come to worst, but it appeared that he either didn't understand or just didn't care. Kakazu sighed. I don't want to have to do this, but you leave me no choice. The sound of horrible ripping filled the air as both his tuxedo and skin parted along his back to allow the tendrils that apparently made up his inner body to fling out. A piece of the tendrils stepped out of his back and a mask on the front of it. The secondary color of the mask was red. If you die, I'm not going to be held accountable. Well, shit. Tamari only managed to look away fast enough to catch the large folded up van that was tossed her way by a passing Naruto clone. Kakazu quirked a brow at her new choice of weapon, a club. She was using fans just a few seconds ago, he thought. Link break. With Yujito and Itachi, their fight could only manage to look more like a game of cats and mouse if Itachi had a genjutsu on that made him look like the granddaddy Mickey Mouse himself. Normally he tried to use genjutsu to ensnare his targets, but that choice was out of the window as soon as Yujito closed her eyes, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to use something as lethal as Susanoo or Amaterasu to fight her, out of fear that she might perish. If that happened, the Matetabe would get out and wreak havoc for sure. But despite her best efforts, she hadn't managed to even touch him aside from when he first engaged with her, and only got burns and claw marks for his trouble. And so they played their game of cat and mouse, Yujito utilizing Matetabe's chakra to get her a sense of smell far beyond the normal human, along with tiny infrared organ across her lips. Was capable of tracking Itachi's movements without the help of her eyes. The chakra cloak that surrounded Yujito was only a partial transformation, meaning that she was still bipedal, if slouching forward a bit, and still more humanoid in stature than feline. Why are you protecting him? Itachi asked. For what I understand, he has committed countless acts of genocide and is now warring against a band of Kekkei users. Not only that, but he rules over Kirigakure with an iron fist. He is not exactly liked among the population. Yujito stopped in front of him. It's not that we don't want him dead, it's just that we don't want you to have what's inside of him. Her voice was very more deep and gravelier than usual. Itachi quirked a brow. What could we do that's more harmful than committing acts of genocide? Yujito flattered for a moment. Just gather your allies and go home. We're only here for Yagura. How long until you try to kill us then? You can't tell us that you're only here for the Sanbi. There are more easily attainable Biju for the other Jinchurikis. So you either exhausted those options by taking them all, or you're impatient enough to go for a public jinchuriki instead of finding one of the weaker ones. Either way, you're going to be coming for us sooner or later. Plus, Mei is probably going to kill Yagura in her own time. Suit yourself, the real Itachi said from behind her before thrusting his tanto into her abdomen, intentionally missing the vital organs. Most of his S-rank ninja skills came from just being a really good ninja as opposed to just being able to wreck shit up using a really effective Kekkei Genkai or fighting style. Speedy in the amount that Yujito was unable to track with her infrared vision was just such one of those ninja skills that he had worked tirelessly on. Instead of screaming and falling to the floor in an unconscious heap like he expected her to, she grabbed the protrusion with both her hands/paws and grew a single tail out of her tailbone, which soon encircled Itachi and tightened. Itachi was forced to let go of his sword and disperse into a flock of crows to get away from the burning tail. She grabbed the sword by the hilt with her tail and yanked it out slowly, not wishing to exacerbate the wound that caused by the blade. The metal was white hot by the time it was completely out of her body. Itachi reintegrated a bit away from her. So, no chance for a dialogue? Eat a dick. Link break with Kuretsuchi and Sasori. Kuretsuchi ducked under another thrust and backpedaled wildly to evade the kick that was sent her way. Sasori was right on top of her after that as he continued to throw punches, kicks, stabs and thrust her way. As soon as their group split up to fight their fight, Kuretsuchi had been relentlessly assaulted without any prior warning. Even if she shouldn't have expected a warning, she should have expected him to have stopped and assessed the situation to give her a break at the very least. That didn't happen. It was a non-stop continuous assault that gave her no opportunity to think out a plan of attacks. A Naruto clone had just given her a sword back, but even with one of her best combat triads now backing in her hand, it was useless against the puppet user. His body was made of marble where wood should be. Any attempts to slice him open would be met with a broken sword and not much else. This wasn't to say that he was invincible, far from it. In fact, his left hand was broken ruin of joints and shattered marble because when going for a downward strike, he had accidentally hit the floor head on. The reason that puppet masters use wood is because wood is flexible and hard, unlike marble which is hard and brittle. Any contact with something of greater density than marble and with sufficient kinetic energy would shatter the part of the puppet. Sasori is a scary opponent, but if she could just get off one set of hand seals, he would be incapacitated just like that. Kuretsuchi growled out in frustration as he sent another punch to her head. This proved to be a feint, however, as he quickly grabbed a hold of her ruined ball gown to pull her in. Not allowing him to do that, she sliced downwards and cut off the piece of dress that he was holding on to. If she could, she would immediately discard the dress to give her greater mobility, but the marble man didn't let up enough for her to do though. Finally, he jumped back, allowing her a sigh of relief as she got out of her dress as fast as she could. Just in undergarments, she rapidly went through handsills and spat a vat of cement at the marble man. It hit him directly in the left leg and fastened itself to the floor, prohibiting his movements completely. Kuretsuchi huffed out a belated cry of excitement as she realized that she was the victor. This cry was ceased only once as she realized that across the hall other marble statues got up from their pedestal and ambled over towards her. God damn it! Sasori's seamlessly marble face didn't reply. Link break with Mei, Yagura, Deidara and Zetsu. I really don't understand why I'm the bad guy here, Yagura commented while ducking under a kick sent for his temple. Maybe it's because you're accountable for countless acts of genocide against my people, May said with while it's dissolving the clay figures that were falling from the sky. No, not that. I meant on a global scale. Don't the other nations realize that the Kakegenkai users are eventually going to overthrow the regular people? Yagura said while in the motions of whackling a bipolar plant person in the abdomen with his hook staff. Says the Jinchuriki who's better than most of the people at combat situations because of the circumstances of his birth. This time there was a large owl that attempted to hit them, but she just sent a blast of lava its way, deflecting the explosion upwards. You need to check your facts. I wasn't given Isubu at birth, and I make no attempts to declare its power as mine. In a strange and queer display, the man he was fighting split directly down the middle, effectively doubling their combat potential. Setting that aside for now, you rule over the people of Kirigakure with an authoritarian dictator. Everyone there is scared of you, and for good reason. The blonde man flying overhead was now swerving to avoid the blasts of caustic steam jetting from her mouth. You know, I'm getting kind of sick and tired of everyone calling me a dictatorial Kage. The title of Kage is inherently dictatorial. Even if some of the villages have consuls, the sole authority is the most competent. The sole authority is the most competent ninja in the world. For the whole Iron Fist thing, I'm only doing what's good for the people. This guy's really annoying. Yagura jumped and bended lateral mid-air, putting himself parallel to the ground to avoid the two synchronized kicks aimed for his legs and head respectively. Then he used both ends of his staff to block both of the vegetarians in the heads. They pulled away to come up with a better strategy. Don't you have any chakra sensors among your sister wives? How is it that six S-rank ninjas managed to sneak into a ball? None of my sister's wives have any chakra sensory abilities, nor does my husband, or the Kage for that matter. You didn't bring anyone with chakra sensory powers with you? For someone who is my most hated and mortal enemy, you sure are nitpicking even when I'm trying to save your ass, May said with a dangerous smile before spewing flames at the flying bomber. Why are you helping me again? Shouldn't you be trying to help this plant thingy? I can't. I know that I can and will kill you eventually, but letting the Akatsuki get the zombie is a very dangerous idea long terms. Why? You're trying to convince me? Nothing like that. Yagura parried a punch sent for his head by the black one and twirled around to use him momentum to club the white one. Then he ducked under the anticipated punch by the black one and used his hook to pull its leg under it. The white one engaged him, so the black one had time to get up once again. Just shocked is all. Shame I can't use Isubu's powers. And why is that? I'm not so good at using the half transformation because it changes my stature so much that I can't process it well. I'm really only good at using the full transformation, but the full transformation power would need wide open space that isn't available while in a ballroom. Noted, May said deviously. Noted away, you still lose to me when you decided to try to fight me in full. A stray sharp bullet barely missed them both and instead hitting one of the columns, instantly destroying it. Yagura glanced at the fight opposite to his and May's with almost disinterested eyes. Doesn't look like your husband is doing too well. Link break with Naruto and Kisame. Kisame never liked Kushimaru. Well, not exactly true. They never really interacted much with other than going on the odd missions together. What really drove Kisame mad was Kushimaru's fighting style. It was the polar opposites to Kisame's fighting style. Kisame made use of wide swipes meant to hit the persons he was aiming for out of the sheer bulk of Samehara. If he kept with it long enough, it works quite well, because it only took one swipe of Samehara to completely drain a Jonin level shinobi from his or her chakra. That never really worked on Kushimaru. Even though his main weapon was a large blade, he practically never went head to head with it, preferring to throw the long sword and entangle his opponents or set traps and await for their arrival. Wherever Naruto was learning how to wield the Noibari, it was working well for him. Kisame blocked another Noibari throw with Samehara by moving it horizontally across his chest. Naruto retracted the Noibari back to himself, then ran directly at him and started doing his best to get within Kisame's guard. Kisame, being far more physically domineering, merely had to change the direction and location of his sword to make sure the Noibari would slid right off and cause him no harm. Using a chakra-boosted jump, Naruto drew a good 10 feet in the air before reaching his zenith. Once at the highest point in his jump, he threw the Noibari directly at Kisame. The shark man smirked before battling the smaller weapon to the side. It impacted and sunk into the ground tip first. Naruto landed with Kisame in between him and Noibari. "Looks like you're all out of options," Kisame said. "Not exactly," Naruto replied before a bump rushing the solid man. Kisame took a step forward and swung his sword like one would swing a bat, but Naruto slid to his knees at the last moments and let Samehara brush the tip of his hair. He got up with no loss of momentum and ran to take a hold of Noibari. Kisame shouldered Samehara and smirked at Naruto. "You're pretty good, kid." Naruto smirked back. "Better than you think." Kisame suddenly became aware of the lines of wires that held on to Samehara by being stuck within its scale. Kisame's eyes widened in surprise. "When did you do that?" Naruto planted both of his feet onto the ground with chakra and grabbed the wires with both his hands. There are always wires coming out of Noibari. Don't get in between it and its users. With a mighty tug, Naruto pulled as hard as he could on the wires while hoping to unbalance Kisame. The Sharkman almost laughed at his attempts to unbalance him. Even with Naruto's full might behind his pullings, Kisame didn't feel anything. "You might be clever, but you're not exactly smart." Kisame took Samehara with both hands and tried to pull Naruto off his feet and towards his chakra-eating swords. Keyword being tried. At the last moment before Kisame pulled on Samehara, Naruto let go of the wires and detached it from the Noibari. Kisame had been expecting to pull an excellent kid with the Noibari towards him. Nothing. Unprepared for this, Kisame stumbled backwards and the Samehara impacted the floor with enough power behind it to crumble the well-polished granite. Naruto took the initiative and rushed at Kisame again, but this time with the Noibari. The shark man looked in sight of fear at the kid with the swinging blade. Giving up on trying to yank out, Kisame went through rapid hand seals before shouting out, "Multi-shark bullets!" Giant sharks made out of water spewing from Kisame's mouth shot towards Naruto at almost point-blank range. Swerving, ducking, and doing his best to get to Kisame, Naruto finally got close to him and thrust his sword at the man. Kisame moved to the side at last moment, only got a tiny slice across his tricep for his trouble. Naruto directed the Noibari to the horizontal to his chest. "Looks like you're all out of options," he said with a grin. Kisame grinned back at him. "What was it you said? Never get between a sword and its user?" From behind Naruto there was the sound of tearing bandages amidst snarling. With a horrified look, Naruto saw the sword shuck the remaining bandages off of itself and grinned at Naruto with a mouth full of huge pointed teeth. Naruto recalled something May had told him earlier. There's only one blade that could be truly considered alive, and that's Samehara, wielded by Kisame. So that's what she meant. Naruto hopped away wildly from the snarling sword as it tried to jump and bite at him. With Naruto no longer blocking his way from getting to Samehara, Kisame leisurely walked over to it and plucked it out of there as it jumped back to him. "Like I said, kid, you're clever, but you're not smart." Kisame sprinted at Naruto full speed, getting within his guard in a few seconds. Naruto found himself on the defensive as Kisame began swinging Samehara wildly once more. More than once clipping Naruto across his limbs. Naruto did his best to parry the strikes away from him, but they were relentless and held a weight behind them, and Naruto hadn't experienced as of yet. The Nuibari was best used within forests that contained trees large enough to hold the weight of a human bodies. There weren't any of those within the ballroom unless you count the pillars, but those were far away enough that he couldn't make use of them. So Naruto decided on a different tactic. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Clones popped up all around Naruto and Kisame as they spread to make a rough circle around him. Taking a chance, Naruto threw the Nuibari to one of his clones, making sure to keep a firm grasp of the wire. Now, without any source of defensive maneuverability, Naruto was forced to rely on his acrobatics and the thin wire to keep Samehara away from him. Kisame had a fair grasp on what Naruto was trying to do, which only increased his want to end the fight quickly. It was hard to figure out a rhythm to Naruto's dodging and fighting style, but Kisame had a fair grasp of when he jumped to get out of the way of his sword, timing it perfectly as Naruto did what Kisame anticipated him to do. The Sharkman hit Naruto directly across the chest with Samehara when he didn't have the maneuverability that the ground afforded him. There was large gashes that had opened on his chest and abdomen and were bleeding profusely. Luckily, Naruto flew above the net of wires that the Shadow Clones had been making by tossing the Samehara around them. As soon as Naruto was clear of the fight zone, they all started running in random directions around the circumference of the circle of Naruto and Kisame fight. He didn't get away fast enough as he began to get entangled in the wires that the clones were holding. Kisame tried to strain against the wires but felt the wires slicing into his skin and muscles and was forced to stop. Damn brat! Kisame muttered before taking a deep breath and slowly melting into the Samehara. As the two combined, he gained traits very similar to what one would describe as a land shark. Naruto got up and tried to quell the bleeding from his chest, taking his new transformation. Naruto gasped in shock. You got to be kidding me. With the fact that his new skin no longer was sliced into by the wires, Kisame grinned widely and strained in full against the wires that held him bound. The wires didn't break, but they were getting loose. Promptly, the circling Naruto's to circle faster and further entangled him. To keep this from happening, Kisame spewed water from his mouth without the need of hand seals and blew the Naruto's away. Kisame was no longer being entangled, but he still didn't have his arms' mobility. Grimacing, Kisame charged Naruto with his face closely to the ground, not leaving him any time to react. Naruto, still weary and with blood loss and not in possession of the Nuibari, his blade, couldn't brace himself well enough for when Kisame clamped his jaw on his left shoulder. The sharp teeth dug into Naruto's skin, muscles and bones, effectively tearing away much of the arm's use. Naruto screamed in pain and agony. Blood-red chakra began to pulsate from Naruto's skin and he took on a feral demeanor as the pain became too much to bear. With newfound strength and the adrenaline to the match, Naruto brought his mobile right arm and began to club away at Kisame's face. This proved to be a bad idea, however, as Kisame's jaw was locked tightly on his muscles and bones. The punches might have hurt Kisame, but they were causing him to have more tearing power to his teeth and jaws. With a sudden tearing away and dripping sound, the arm came directly off of Naruto's body. He screamed in pain once more and began to lose his autonomy. Kisame's face was patchwork of bloody gashes and bruises gotten from Naruto's incessant wailing. Sorry about the mispronunciation, guys, because there are so much hard words that I didn't even heard before or thought existed. I apologize for that. Without further ado, let's continue our story. This wasn't good for Kisame. His best defense against Jinchuriki was Samehara, and now that he was fused with it, he couldn't absorb the chakra cloak that was making Naruto stronger. He didn't have any time to speak as Naruto was suddenly on top of him and wailing away at his chest, arms, face, and any other places that Naruto could get a good hit on. There was no form of foresight, merely the want to inflict as much pain on the shark person as possible. Link break. Uchiha looked away slightly to listen to the screeches of her husband. Itachi appeared to her side, hoping to capitalize on her confusion by thrusting another Tanto to her side. Not being taken for a fool, she used her newly gotten Tanto to deflect his strike and return another one. Itachi dispersed once more to get a better vantage point of the battlefield. Link break. I got you now, you bug bitch! Hidan licked the blood clean from his second rod and stood on the ritual circle. His entire body turned black with white marks gracing him, rough shape of skeleton. Fu panted and winced as she saw the man transform. Her body had gone through a rather radical transformation as well. There were transparent red pieces of armor covering her attire, both from the partial transformation with Chaume. In one of the pieces of armor on her arm there was a small gash leaking a green fluid. Hidan pointed his spike downwards and impaled his right thigh. Fu expected the worst, but it didn't come. She did, however, feel a strange sensation on the armor piece corresponding to his right thigh. Looking down, she noticed a small hole opening on the translucent armor. Piecing things together, Fu smirked in relief. Hidan, not only seeing her fall to her knees in agony, decided to up the stakes and pulled another rod from his ruined tuxedo to plunge it into his abdomen. The armor on Fu's chest parted slightly as it cracked open from the pantomimite injury. Seeing as opening, Fu rushed at Hidan one last time to hopefully immobilize him. His eyes widened in surprise. In a desperate last-ditch attempt, he pulled his last rod and shoved it up his jaw and into the brain. Neither of them died from cranial injury. Without any weapons left, he fell victim to her slashes and thrusts. Link break. Kuratsuchi dodged, dipped, divided, ducked, and dodged from the flurry of fists attempting to pelt her. Currently, there were only two statues left, with the rest being stuck in a cement that held them to the ground. To her surprise, a large shark missile struck one in the back, with thoroughly destroying it, and afforded her the opportunity to stick the other to the ground with some more quicklime. She fell to her knees at last and took in great heaps of air. Bruises were blossoming all over her body from the strikes that managed to impact her, and her right arm didn't feel like it was moving like it was supposed to do. Despite that, she was content that she had managed to win. With a grin on her face, she faded from consciousness and fell to the floor. Link break. Temari looked at the roaring inferno with no small amount of pride. When he started using fire techniques, she knew that he didn't know what type of fighter he was fighting anymore. She used that to her advantage, and when he used a particularly large fire technique, she rebutted the fire with a large wind technique of her own. Using fire overtakes and amplifies wind, but her was stronger to such a higher degree that it amplified the fire and managed to change its direction, putting Kakuzu in the middle of the great inferno of fire. The tangle of black strands fell to the floor, and the mask crumbled along with the rest of it. Seeing as the fight was over, she turned heels and began to run to Mei and Yagura's fight, not expecting the red-hot strand of microfibers to suddenly wrap around her mouth and face. She wasn't able to get out a full-fledged scream when they did manage to encircle her mouth. More strands gathered directly above her left thigh and plunged downwards, burying themselves into her musculature, slicing her arteries and cracking her femur. Only small amount of blood poured out because of the fact that the red-hot fibers were cauterizing the wound. She fell to the floor with a tiny intake of breath and was out like a light. Unknown to her, the strands buried themselves into the ground and tangled themselves or dangled themselves there. Kakuzu, unmoving from his position on the floor, tried to get up but failed tremendously. Link break. May could tell the bomber was getting desperate as the bombs he threw were getting smaller and smaller in volume and blasting power. She might have been starting to get low on chakra, but she didn't let up for a second, even without her attention focused on Naruto. She could tell that he needed her help from the animalistic screams being belted out. Behind her, Yagura was making a great show of beheading the white Zetsu, while the black Zetsu watched from a distance. Link break. Itachi stared at all the other fights with calculating eyes before raising his arm into the air and shouting of a special fire jutsu designed to make more light and noise than heat and explosive power. The ones conscious of noticing the light immediately shot off to do the tasks that they were left with. Black Zetsu melted into the ground. Deidara went around and picked up all the unconscious members of the Akatsuki that he could manage, even if that meant sending the occasional small explosion to dislodge a stubborn Jinchuriki. And Itachi looked at Yujito with cold eyes. Remember, the only reason you won today was because you had us at disadvantage. Yujito huffed in his amusement. You had us at disadvantages too. Without saying another word, Itachi dispersed into crows one last time. Yujito fell to the ground, feeling as if his presence was finally gone, looked at the remnants of the battle. Mei and Yagura were sizing each other up now that the immediate threat was gone. Naruto was unconscious along with Temari and Kurotsuchi, and Fu was repeatedly stepping on the something that used to resemble something of a hat. Yujito was on the last leg of her strength as she looked at the members of her group, as she looked at the table of stringing Kage, as she looked at the guest and daimyos unconscious on the floor. This is going to be tough to explain. Chapter 26: The After Party. Naruto, for the first time, nor for the last time, opened his eyes to take in an environment of which he was not all too familiar with. It was overwhelmingly white for one. His eyes had trouble adjusting to the bright light shining in his eyes. Man, I can't pronounce so many words today. Well, anyways, apologize for that. We'll continue. Once they got used to the light, Naruto took in more aspects of the room he was in. The walls were a light beige color and looked like they had the texture of smoothed down sandstone. The twin bed he was laying in was the only one in the room, and there was a light humming coming from his left. Looking over, Naruto saw a machine that didn't look like any other that he had ever seen before, even in hospital. Hello? Naruto called out. He was the only one in the room. Off to the side were a few sets of empty chairs. There was sunlight pouring in from a rather large window nearby, just missing the bed he was in. Hello? Naruto called out again, slightly louder. There was no answer to his call. Naruto pulled the blank white sheets covering his body using his right arm and tried to get up and explore the building he was in. He was held firm, however, to the machine. The wire stuck at Naruto's left shoulder. They wound down from his left arm in a haphazard way to eventually connecting to the machine. Naruto tried to yank his arm out of the bundle of wires but didn't get any response from the appendage. Greatly worried about this, Naruto took the hold of the bundle with his right arm and tried to yank it off his left. With a detached clicking sound, the bundle fell from Naruto's arm. Well, not exactly. As it turned out, the bundle of wires only held more wires inside of it. Not Naruto's arm, as he had suspected. The end of Naruto's left arm only went a few inches past his shoulder and stopped with a metal latch device grafted onto his skin. Naruto looked stupidly at the stump of his left arm for a good 10 seconds before trying to move it. The only thing that happened was to stump wiggling slightly. Other than that, there was only the feeling of a phantom arm having no effect on reality. Naruto started breathing heavily. He didn't remember a lot from what made him go unconscious in the first place, but he did know that the Akatsuki showed up at one point. Oh wait, this was something that Naruto said. Oh wait, this was something that Nazo sensei had told him about. Illusions that were meant to mess up with his sense of reality. Naruto brought up his one usable hand in front of him and gathered his chakra. Doing what Nazo sensei told him to do in order to dispel Genjutsu, he unleashed his chakra all in one go. Nope, his arm was still missing from the body. There was the pattering of feet outside in what he presumed was the hallway. The door to the room clanked open. In the doorway stood Yujito with bags around her eyes. Hey Yujito. Naruto said with a smile and a wave. Someone put me under a Genjutsu. Can you help me out of it? Yujito's mouth parted slightly in shock. I felt the chakra pulse from here, she said eerily. Yeah, I don't know what you see, but I can't see or move my left arm, so I must be under a Genjutsu or something. Can you help me out of it? Yujito stood in the doorway in shock and confused for a few seconds, trying to say something but always going back on it before any sounds came from her mouth. Let's sit down, Naruto. Why? The grave sound of her voice was putting Naruto on edge. This is just a Genjutsu, right? Right? Yujito's face fell at the sound of Naruto's fight, figuring out the reality he was living in. Let's just sit down. We can talk about it. Naruto gaped blankly at the stump of his left arm while Yujito sat down on the bed, pulling Naruto with her all the way. Do you remember the fight? Yujito asked as calmly as she could. I remember fighting the fish guy. He and his sword, much I guess. Then he ran at me and bit me on my. Naruto trailed off. Then I got really angry and then nothing. Naruto, you lost your arm in your fight with Kisame. There was no chance of it being reattached to you due to the severity of the nerve damage on the actual arm itself. Naruto didn't say anything. He just let the words coming out of her mouth impact him harder than any kunai or shuriken could. He made a choking sound as if he wanted to tell Yujito something. The sound died down as soon as he realized that he wasn't going to be able to produce any sounds. There's good news though. Naruto looked at Yujito directly in the eyes, completely ready for any good that might have come from this fight. Kankuro, Tamari's brother, is a very accomplished ninja puppeteer. He says that he can build you a new arm. Naruto looked at the dead space where his missing appendage was. Not being able to move it, it was like he had lost something near and dear to him, but was only able to comprehend the feeling of loss now that it was gone. Naruto sighed and leaned into Yujito. What about the others? Fu, Mei and Kuretsuchi are all alright. Only a few exhaustions and few scrapes and some chakra depletion, but they were fine after a few seconds of medical ninjutsu treatment. What about Temari? Yujito looked at a while to answer. She's alive. The statement worried Naruto greatly. What's that supposed to mean? Well, in her fight, there was a mishap. Kakasu the Immortal damaged her left leg beyond repair and seared burns into face. Naruto was floored by the statement. Is she okay? He asked, shaken up. A lot better than you. Due to circumstances beyond her control, when Tsunade woke and treated Temari, she had to cut off her leg mid-thigh. Right now she is in operation getting her new leg attached. Naruto sighed in relief. It was a bad situation, but at least it was better than Naruto had thought it was. Where's everyone else? Sleeping. I was on watch. Naruto rubbed his eyes. They were feeling crusty. What time is it anyway? About 9 in the morning. How long have we been here? 11 hours. Naruto huffed in amusement. At least it's not 2 months. Yujito gave an amusement huff as well. Silver linings, huh? Naruto leaned his head against Yujito's shoulder. We're in a hospital. I'm guessing sooner, right? The walls are made out of sandstone after all. Yujito wrapped an arm around Naruto's waist to pull him in tighter. Looks like you're getting better and better at observations. Had to happen at some point, right? They stayed in the position for a while. It was comforting to Naruto. He had just lost something vitally important to him and didn't know how to respond to it. At least he had Yuito there to help him, even if that help was just holding him tight and not leaving him. This is where I'm going to be leaving this part of, guys. I hope you like this one. If you do, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And this is Apollo Uchiha and I'm signing out. Peace.